Could you just ask a question, because I'm actually only going to take questions.
Why can't people do it more on their own? Why does the state have to take care of everybody?
The state does take care of everybody. I mean, I think that you can do it early on in a good, healthy, preventive way, or you can do it later on in a very ineffective way. That if we don't step forward, and things have changed. Now, if you think nothing has changed in society from the time you were young, it's changed since I was young. The streets are much more dangerous in many parts of the city. Children are assaulted, they are seeing violence at an early age. We probably have classrooms full of children who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. That is not addressed. We are living in different times. There was more public transportation, probably, when you were younger than there is now. Actually, they're seeing cuts in public transportation. And you asked me the question, now I get to have the microphone and answer it. If we ignore the problems that people have, and I know there's this great reluctance to reach out and help, but we grow together as a society when we can help each other. And if you don't do it now, we will be paying for it with higher cost through sicker people through emergency rooms. That way we will be paying it for more crime and people ending up in the criminal justice system, which is something we have to address. We spend more on the criminal justice system in our states than any of the surrounding states. And I think that's something that is a really misdirected use of taxpayer dollars. And we're spending $30,000 to $100,000 per inmate, that we're paying so much less for children that would keep them out of some of those situations. For it another way. We will pay for it.
I have a question and a comment, and it regards Planned Parenthood. There's a few things I'm disappointed I didn't hear from them, which is I hear about the women's health and the women's concern about the kids. What about parents too? Let's get the dads involved. Maybe you can find some of these couples that raised their kids successfully together to help them find their way to have a better life. My question for you is, where do you stand with Planned Parenthood, and do you think I should have to pay for abortions when it's against my moral principles?
May I just say one thing before we go forward, and we have limited time, we're going to try and get as many questions as we can. But when I agreed to be moderator, I get to call on people too, so I recognize you, but I wish you...
others stand up. I won't stand up again, but I would like to hear a question on your stand on Planned Parenthood and funding.
We'll come back to the comment, excuse me. This is, now you may sit down, and this is not a candidate forum. And so we certainly, I'm sure that Sandy wants to talk about her vision in the budget. And
that's why I'm asking for information from her. But I see you're fluffing
in the
this
health care. And Molly Swank, who is a professional in this area as well, may have something to say about it.
Before I pass it on, the federal and state budgets say that state dollars cannot go to pay for abortion. It is a small part of the Planned Parenthood budget, and some people, no matter what we say, will never, ever believe that state dollars do not pay for abortions. What state dollars do pay for is reproductive care, screenings for breast cancer, screenings for cervical cancer, early intervention, and it's an investment that saves money. So if you care about poor women, and I think we should care about poor women, and we're cutting their access to health care through the Badger Care cuts and all these others, and then there is a program, not just Planned Parenthood, but other programs throughout the state that bring in federal matching dollars to help keep us healthy. And being healthy is, believe it or not, good for the economy, because it costs money when we get sick.
Representative Pasch really just answered that part of the question. I would love to see happy families with a mother and a father, but a lot of the times...
Or two dads or two moms.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, who doesn't want to see happy families? Unfortunately, a lot of the women that do come to us are on their own. Like Sandy Pasch said, Planned Parenthood does a lot more than abortion. I mean, we do sex education, we do the cancer screenings, we do health care for everybody. No one will ever get turned away. So, I don't know.
I would just underline something you brought up earlier, that there was money for men to come to Planned Parenthood for reproductive health care needs that we had waited for a long time. For a long time, we only treated half of a couple for sexually transmitted diseases. And one began to think that we believed in immaculate infection. But now we finally were getting smart to put an end to this, and now the funding will dry up. So yes, ma'am.
This flyer says that the budget eliminates advanced placement programs in education. Could somebody explain, does that eliminate all advanced placement programs in all schools, or just eliminate some funding, or?
It deletes categorical aid programs totaling $29.9 million. It's advanced placement, alcohol and drug abuse prevention intervention, children at risk, English for Southeastern Asian children, improving pupil academic achievement, nursing services, preschool through grade 5 services, and the STEM program, science, technology, engineering, and math.
So, I guess I still don't know what that means. For example, in Whitefish Bay, does that mean there won't be any more AT programs?
Whitefish Bay is a negative tertiary aid district. It doesn't get really money from the state, but because of the property values there, so the funding formula will affect different communities differently.
So it depends on how much you're getting from the state.
From the
and how
state
you'll be affected.
to advanced placement.
So
So
probably MPS will be severely affected.
MPS is hurting a lot, a lot.
Explain how voucher program is going to affect education, particularly in the suburbs? How the voucher program or the choice program will affect education, particularly in the suburbs?
What was just passed is an expansion of the voucher program to City of Milwaukee. Children can use private schools in Milwaukee County, not just in the City of Milwaukee. It is not expanded that children in the suburban schools are eligible for voucher schools at this time, although there has been proposals by the governor to expand the voucher program in selected cities. There's also been a bill introduced to give parents tax breaks if they send their children to private schools. I think I haven't looked at that bill in a few weeks, but I believe it was $1,800 or $1,600 the first few years, and then it'll be $2,500 to give parents an incentive to take their children out of public schools and put them into private schools at a time when we don't have enough money right now to support our public school education. So across the state, public school education is at risk.
In the 80s, California did something similar. I don't know if it's quite as drastic, but I do know that they did pretty sure that they cut police and fire, whereas this one isn't. But it still is just as drastic. Could you compare those two? What will happen if all of this goes through as it stands right now?
I can't compare California, but I have been going around talking with local community leaders as to what the impact of the budget will be on schools and public services. And because there are cuts to shared revenue, that is the money that the state gives different communities to support their infrastructure, public services, police and fire department, etc. And those cuts have been severely limited, and the tools that have been discussed with the changes in collective bargaining, I've been told over and over, every single community that I've gone into, that there was one, because they don't get any shared revenue, I believe, from the community. But if you do get shared revenue, the tools regarding the changes in collective bargaining are inadequate, they're empty, and they just don't make up for the shortfalls that communities will receive. Police chief told me that if there is a crime in their community, based on what's happening, they're probably going to have to lay off one officer, and if there's only one crime per shift and no one's on vacation, they could probably handle it. A fire chief told me that with the cost of fuel increasing 25%, and yet the limit on any increases in local communities to meet the cost of that growing cost of fuel, there may be longer waits for 911. That every time they pull out one of their rigs, it's $50, and so they're going to have to look at layoffs, and so it means how long do you want to wait when you push 911, so, or when you call. So there are going to be changes, and it really should have a more thorough discussion than we're just cutting across the board and somehow everyone will be able to live with it. It really is taking state control over local communities, telling local communities, the state knows what's important to you, and we're going to make the decisions based on your...
Yeah, thanks so much. You know, these stories have been so heart-wrenching, and one of the worst things about the proposed budget is that it's getting us to fight with each other about, should we cut libraries or art? Should we cut fire stations or cops? Should we cut family planning or badger care? When there's another alternative, which is increasing revenue, hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes that aren't being collected. So I wonder if any of you would like to comment on how do we change the conversation so that we're talking about increasing revenue instead of assault.
That's the kiss of death. I think we need to start having a really good discussion as to what do we want to invest in our communities. And it's a discussion that there's great unwillingness to have. The cuts to shared revenue, for example, mean that people may not have recycling pickups or garbage pickups or things like that. So if they want the same service and you can't increase it through taxes, then you will pay through a fee. And fees are somewhat regressive, that a millionaire on Lake Drive will pay the same fee as someone who is barely getting by somewhere else in the community. So they're very regressive and you can't deduct them on your taxes. So we have to, at some point, I think, get serious about what do we want to invest in our quality of life. And that, again, no one wants to pay more in taxes, etc., but people tend to want the same level of services. And I always went around and said, yeah, people say don't increase my taxes, but make sure my roads are safe and my drinking water's clean and my police do. So all those things that we were taking for granted, that the police would come and the fire department would respond and that the roads would be repaired. And now, even on Tuesday, we voted that clean water is a choice and it's not something that we should just expect when we turn on our water. So the discussion has gotten a little bit ridiculous, but I think we need to have a conversation about what do we want to invest as far as the quality of services that we receive. And that's a discussion that we have not had.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. No, please.
No, what I was going to say is that for everything that everybody's saying here, I agree. We have to make priorities. We have to say what is important, and we all have to give a little something, And
That's right.
so I agree that we shouldn't let this divide us, because you know what? This is our country, and if I'm not mistaken, I thought all of these things are our rights, and we all need to fight for them. So the interesting thing is that, no, I think that the creativity of saying, we all do this in our house. We look at the amount of money we have, and we say, okay, something's got to give, or I'm going to have to shift around, or I'm going to have to be creative with my own budget. It seems to me that the people that are making the decisions are not looking at this like it's a household and saying, how do we make this all work? And something's got to give. And we have to move things, and we have to earn some more money here, and we have to shift things. So I think that creative mind of looking at different options, and this is where we all come together and say, I don't agree with you on a lot of stuff, but I kind of have this idea. It's a little, what do you think about this? And that's the kind of conversation that I think we need to start having.
And I think we also look at and do things like Torrie's been doing. We decide to assume some risk to invest in the future in education and things like that. We can continue speaking among ourselves, and I'm sure that our panelists will be here for a little bit to answer questions, but I would like to hear them. We need to leave with a sense of purpose and promise that we can do something. Cornell West recently described the state of social justice and civil rights and fairness and human respect as his understanding of that in America today as hope on a tightrope. I want to have a sense of greater optimism and a sense of greater empowerment. So we're going to go down the line, and we'll start at that end in talking about what are the steps we take to have an impact on budget decisions. As we know, the governor presented his budget to the legislature. There have been joint finance committee hearings. They continue, and the legislature will take it up, and we have to be heard. So.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the interesting thing about this whole process for me is I used to take a lot of things for granted. You know, it's just always going to be this way and it's always going to work, and I've got this whole wonderful world that does things for me. No. So this whole process has been wonderful because not only myself, but many, many other mothers have said, wait a second here. You people that are making all the, you need to listen to me. You need to listen to your constituents. You can't just make decisions. So we need to say what we feel. We need to write to all of our elected officials and say, this is not okay. This is what I'd like to see, and these are the reasons why. We need to be constructive, but we need to, if we don't say anything, then they're just going to keep pushing stuff through. So we need to talk with our neighbors. We need to talk with our coworkers. We need to talk with our children to say, do you really understand what this means? And find, this is the interesting thing, find what resonates with them. So maybe my neighbor is an elderly woman who has no kids in education, so I'm not going to necessarily talk to her about art and music, but I will talk to her about all of the things that affect her. And then suddenly she said, are you serious? So writing to people, talking to people, and thinking creatively, because I think that is what makes this country great, and I think that is what we need to do now.
I think we're all going to say the same thing, but I think one of the most important things that we can do right now is reach out to our legislators. Not only write them, but send them emails, give them calls. The more you reach out to them, the more they have the opportunity to listen. Talk to your friends, like Sarah said, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your neighbor. Figure out what's important to them and work with them to educate them. And then one of the most important things that we're finding right now are people's stories. If you have a story to tell, reach out to one of us, reach out to an organization that your story pertains to and tell it. Legislators right now aren't looking at numbers, they're not looking at statistics, they're not looking at massive crowds outside of their windows, but they can and they will read stories. And then in regards to reproductive health care, I brought some postcards in the back, they're pink, can't miss them. If you'd like to learn more about Planned Parenthood and our efforts right now, just sign one of those and I'll get you on our email list. And you can always visit our website too, it's ppawi.org, so you can find out more information there.
Sorry, now that she's plugging her website. There's a wonderful website started by a group of mostly mothers of public school students, and it's ilovemypublicschools.com. There's a lot of information there for you, events and addresses.
I would have to, go with the same thing that these other two young ladies just said, in making your legislators know that you do not, or you do, agree with what they're doing. Because if you don't agree with it and it goes on and it goes on and you're not heard, guess what? Who cares? They don't. We have to make sure that everybody knows that they're not the only ones there. And sometimes I have a group of people that I talk to on a regular about different stuff like this because we kind of get together and we kind of understand each other and we agree to disagree sometimes. But we know that, hey, if we don't say something, nobody knows. And I'm a firm believer, if you don't say anything, don't expect anything. Period. If you don't say anything, I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what you stand for. So therefore, I'm just going to do whatever I feel like doing. If I feel like slapping you, I'm going to slap you. Why? Because you didn't say don't. And it's just that simple. If we don't talk to them and tell them what we're thinking at this moment, it's not okay for you to take $8 million out of Milwaukee public school systems and expect them to just go on. 800 million. But, it's not okay to take $5 from them and expect them to continue and do better things with the children. It's just not going to happen. And along with these other organizations, 9 to 5 they're doing an extremely good job at getting the word out. They are doing a membership drive right now until the end of May. It was $25. You can join now for $10. It's a very great 15. Yeah. I'm sorry. Not paying good attention, huh? $15, but nonetheless, it's really good program to get in, an organization to get into, to stay on the key things that are really, really touching your community and everyone else. We have to stay abreast of what's going on, otherwise we'll be lost.
Prior to everything that happened in Madison recently, I think a lot of people had no idea what state government really did. So, for better or for worse, I think people now have a new appreciation for state government and how important it is to get involved, and to know who your representative is, and to know who your senator is, and to vote in every election, and to let your voices be heard. Democracy does not end on election day. Your representatives and senators have an obligation to listen to you whether they agree with you or not. This is what we do in our country, and if it was so simple that the majority party won and nothing else needs to be discussed because they won and you lost, too bad, we would never have a public hearing again. You would never need to contact your legislator to let them know how you felt on any bill, because it didn't matter. You voted for them and they can do what they want for the next 2 or 4 years. And that's not true. Democracy does not end after Election Day. You continue to have a voice. You need to continue to let your voice be heard. Contact your representatives and your senators and speak up and know what's important to you. I think these are really difficult times for Wisconsin. We are very split. Some people are taking pride in the divisiveness of our state. I am not proud of the divisiveness of our state. I think we have more in common than we want to think about. I think that we want to come up with our values. I think we all value education on some level. I think we all value health on some level. I think we all value basic public services on some level. I think where we disagree is how we're going to pay for it and how we value it compared to other issues. But these are tough economic times. They were caused by global problems in Wall Street and across the world. And yet we keep looking at some of our most vulnerable when we're looking at how to fix it. I really don't think public school children are to blame for the cost of the economic crisis, or teachers are to blame for the cost of the economic crisis, or people who are struggling to get by are to blame for the economic crisis, or middle-class people are to blame for we don't have one villain in all of this, and so we have to start pointing at villains because it's keeping us divided. We need to come together for a common good. It's what made Wisconsin great and wonderful, and I think it's a direction that we want to take our state. So stay involved.
Thank you all for being here. It gives me hope to see so many people gathered to talk about these issues of our days. These are different times, and the woman has left. But there are more people on the street and more cars on the street, and there aren't trolley cars that were there when I was young, when you think about the public transportation, and there are more guns in their pockets. and more drugs available and a lot of different pressures and challenges. I thank 9 to 5 for helping us be as smart and strategic as we can by focusing on the fact that if we get it right for women, we're all going to be just fine.
Barbara Lawton, our panelists. Continue to stay involved. We're going to make our case now, and we're going to continue to make our case. If anyone wants to help stick around and clean up the chairs, we'd also appreciate that.